It was also a day when the bonds of humanity, global, local, and personal, strengthened in unimaginable ways. It's estimated that 1/3 of the world's population witnessed the attacks, the majority through television and the internet. Each of us remembers reaching out on that day to those we held dearest. We came together back then, and the bonds that were strengthened are the positive legacy of 9/11. Bonds between friends and coworkers who faced unthinkable circumstances on what should have been a regular Tuesday morning. Bonds between strangers who had never met before but risked their lives for one another all the same. Bonds between what and who was lost and between all of us who were left behind. The clip I just played was a sample of the materials we are collecting for the 9/11 Memorial Museum's exhibitions. These recordings were made at our preview site on Vesey Street, which opened in August of 2009 as a resource for people from around the world who have continued to visit the World Trade Center throughout the rebuilding. 2 weeks ago, we welcomed our 2 millionth visitor, FDNY Captain Patrick Sobota, who assisted in the recovery efforts after 9/11 and came to the preview site on a day off with his wife and twin teenagers. This level of visitation is an indication that the public's will to commemorate the events of 9/11 and pay their respects at the site remains as strong as ever, and in some ways seems only to be increasing. 9/11, after all, is a story that began long before September 11th, 2001, and one that continues to shape our world today. I'd like to thank the Alliance for the Arts and the New York Times for inviting me here today, and Commissioner Kate Levin. And usually when I get such a nice introduction like that, I often wish that my mom was here to hear it. She is here to hear it, and as a bonus, my mother-in-law is here too, so that was excellent. That was excellent. Speaking of Kate, though, the cultural community of New York City is very lucky to have such an extraordinary, dedicated champion, and both from an organizational perspective and a personal perspective, I feel lucky that she has committed so much time, creativity, and care to the memorial and the museum. Many aspects of both have been influenced by her visionary leadership, and I truly cannot thank her enough. But I'll try. Thanks, Kate. As Kate said, memorial designer Michael Arad is also here, whose creativity as an architect and compassion as a New Yorker will forever alter the landscape of our city for the better. The support of hundreds of thousands of people has brought us to where we are now, preparing to open our nation's memorial to the 2,983 victims of September 11th, 2001 and February 26, 1993 in just 74 days. Fundamentally, the memorial's mission is twofold. First, commemoration of the lives of the nearly 3,000 victims. In honoring them, we acknowledge that they were the everyday mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, and sons and daughters who made up the fabric of this country and who did on that day what all of us do every day: simply get up in the morning and go to work. More than 400 of them were first responders who died performing their sworn duties, rushing into rather than out of harm's way. The victims hailed from 93 nations. The oldest was 85, and the youngest 2.5. As important as commemoration is, we also aspire to educate the millions of people who will visit each year through a museum that will not just tell the story of what happened on 9/11, but will also recognize that the events are part of an ongoing narrative, one that, as events like the passing of the 9/11 health bill, Osama bin Laden's death, and the continuing war in Afghanistan shows us, is not yet fully told. The 9/11 Memorial Museum will open in 2012, and depending on how this evening goes, I'd love to come back next year to detail our plans for what we hope will become one of our nation's landmark institutions. Fundamentally, the objectives of the museum are threefold. First, to be the global focal point for telling the story of what happened on 9/11, told through first-person accounts, artifacts, and digital documentation. Second, the museum will address how the events happened, including the rise of al-Qaeda, precursor events throughout the 1990s, and the 9/11 plot itself. And third, the museum will explore the big societal questions. What does this mean for our future that continue to define the post-9/11 world in which we live? This approach is really a credit to 9/11 Memorial Museum Chairman Mayor Bloomberg, who in one of his first meetings with the museum staff simply said that this museum needs to be a serious educational institution and that we must engage on the difficult topics inherent in any authentic examination of 9/11 and address them directly, albeit sensitively. In a separate space in the museum, separate from the historical exhibitions, every one of the nearly 3,000 victims of 1993 and 2001 attacks will be memorialized in a wall of faces and names that extend around the entire room, rising from floor to ceiling. In the inner room of this memorial exhibition, we'll remember the victims for the lives that they lived, rather than the death that they died, demonstrating again the fundamental message that they were who we are. Being 74 days away from opening the memorial certainly warrants looking ahead to the tremendous effort that will have to go into the remaining construction and initial operations, to the 9/11/11 commemoration ceremony for victims' family members, who will see on that day the memorial and their loved ones' names permanently inscribed there for the first time, to September 12th, when we open to the public, and to continuous operations thereafter. But being 74 days away also warrants looking back at how far we've come. Even before plans were formalized to create a memorial at the World Trade Center site, architect Michael Arad imagined memorializing the Twin Towers with two voids in the Hudson River, an idea that was physically too difficult to realize, but that served as the basis for his submission to the formal memorial design competition held in 2004. In fact, he did this sketch in October of 2001 before there was any announcement about an upcoming memorial. Michael's design, entitled Reflecting Absence, was selected from more than 5,000 submissions received from 63 countries. It was the largest international design competition that was ever held. All but the final rounds of the competition were judged blind by a jury that included a widow of a 9/11 victim, prominent architects, Maya Lin, of course, the winner of a similar competition for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and Public Art Fund President Susan Friedman. Michael was a 34-year-old, then unknown architect working for the New York City Housing Authority. The final design, created with landscape architect Peter Walker, emerged through subsequent planning and coordination with the other projects on the WTC site, which Mayor Bloomberg has also called the most complex and concentrated construction project ever undertaken. This animation shows how all the final design will come together, fitting the memorial into the landscape of Lower Manhattan. The finished site will reintroduce Greenwich Street to the east of the memorial and Fulton Street to the north, which will eliminate the superblock of the original World Trade Center. This animation conveys the fully developed WT site with the 4 planned office towers and the streets and sidewalks surrounding the memorial complete. You see the 2 reflecting pools sitting in the very footprints of the Twin Towers and feature the largest man-made waterfalls in the United States. More than 400 oak trees line the surrounding plaza, planted in such a way that viewed from north or south, they look like a natural forest, but from east or west, they create arches that recall the Gothic arches that ring the Twin Towers. The museum's exhibitions are housed at bedrock underneath the reflecting pools. And visitors will enter through an above-ground pavilion between the 2 pools designed by the Norwegian architecture firm Snohetta. The glass and steel facade of the pavilion is designed to reflect the pools and the trees differently throughout the day, creating a unique experience for each and every visitor. And around the perimeters of the pools are the names of the nearly 3,000 victims inscribed in bronze. It's no secret that the World Trade Center rebuilding has had its share of challenges, but the mayor and the memorial's board of directors made a commitment to dedicate the memorial on the 10th anniversary of the attacks. It was born out of a simple yet fundamental recognition that, like it or not, the eyes of the world would be focused on that site on that day to an intense degree. We simply had to deliver a memorial that inspires and that this entire country could be proud of. For the first few years that the memorial is open, visitors will have the unique opportunity to witness the rebuilding taking place all around them. An historic view that includes the towers rising, including One World Trade Center, which will be the tallest building in the country, and the WTC transportation hub that is taking shape. The continuing construction also means that we will have to closely manage our capacity at the memorial, and advanced reservations will be temporarily required to ensure visitor safety. We will use a timed reservation system through which people can reserve free passes for a specific date and for a specific time. And next week, the system will be available to victims' family members by phone, and the following week to the public, July 11th, online at 9/11memorial.org. This is just one aspect of what is truly an exhaustive effort involving not just memorial staff, and I want to separately acknowledge Deputy Mayor Patty Harris and the staff in the Mayor's office, the project's construction manager, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and too many city and state agencies to name. They are all working to ensure that every visitor to the memorial is given the opportunities to have a meaningful and, of course, safe experience. Since I've had the privilege of working at the memorial, I've heard thousands of 9/11 stories. And while the pain of that day will never and should never be forgotten, there are also the memories that inspire. As a downtown resident then and now, I remember the days after 9/11, when hundreds of first responders and recovery workers dropped everything and appeared at the site to help, when grief was felt around the world and compassion from everywhere flooded New York. And I think we all remember that feeling of being united. The memorial itself, through the arrangement of the 2,983 names of the men, women, and children who were taken from us too soon, will remind the world again of the importance of the bonds that connect us. They are incised in bronze around the perimeters of the twin pools and will be lit from within at night. Like the individual lives they represent, the names are connected to each other. Unique to any other memorial in the world, they are arranged by layers of meaning, reflecting where people were and who they were with on 9/11. We conducted outreach to the thousands of next of kin of the victims, asking for guidance on the particular names with which they wanted to see their loved ones' names inscribed. Over 1,200 of these adjacency requests guided the entire arrangement, in tribute to the relationships shared in life, as you'll see in just a second. Through a process that included painstaking placement of individual names by hand, the use of a complex algorithm, help from the companies that lost employees on 9/11, the memorial will be an enormously moving tribute to the 2,983. Last month, we launched the website, names.911memorial.org. The site replicates the entire names arrangement and allows people to begin to understand the meaning that underlies it. It's an application that will also be available at the memorial and through handheld devices. And tonight I'd like to take you through the site and a few of the stories within it. Like many aspects of the memorial itself, our objective was to take something complex, in this case, the layers of meaningful information infused in the names arrangement, and portray it as simply as possible. This is the landing page of the site showing the memorial looking north. Most broadly, the names are organized into 9 groups, 1 for the victims of the February 26, 93 bombing, 2 for the Twin Towers, 4 for the hijacked flights, 1 for the Pentagon, and 1 for first responders. Within these groupings, the names of victims from each company or agency, or, for example, the passengers aboard a flight, appear together. Here, by searching for Cantor Fitzgerald, you can see the names of the 658 Cantor employees, everyone in the company's offices that morning, and where they are inscribed around the North Memorial Pool.